What if energy-intensive manufacturers could cut costs, lower carbon, and modernize operations without spending any capital upfront? Welcome to Industry Ignited. I'm Dr. Leanne Aguilar, and today I'm joined by David Kipling, CEO of Onsite Energy Group, a fast-growing UK energy business helping industrial companies deploy fully funded on-site energy and efficiency solutions through innovative power purchase agreements. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leanne. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, you began your career as a chartered accountant and corporate finance professional. What first pulled you towards energy, renewables, and eventually industrial decarbonization?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an odd journey. One career ended and another one started. I actually ended a career in effectively the property sector and hadn't a clue what I was going to do. And this was ended up being offered some jobs as a CFO in the innovative energy sector. Didn't like the companies, but actually liked the sector, and started realizing I could apply my corporate finance background into what was the emerging renewables sector then. So actually ended up specializing in corporate finance in renewables back in 2009-10, and then started actually taking the opportunity to combine that with the property skills and developing projects. So I sort of moved into developing wind and solar projects back in 2010-11, and that's really what launched me into the whole space.
Okay, so opportunity basically presented itself.
Opportunity presented, but it was a really interesting sector, and as it happened to coincide, lots of other people I've ended up, moving on to joining, had seen the same opportunity around that sort of time, 2009-10, that energy was starting to decentralize, and there was such a big opportunity. I think we all know it today as the energy transition, probably, but it was the first glimmers of it really in 2008-9.
Yeah. Now, you spent time working globally across factories in places like Mexico, the US, China, and Malaysia.
Yeah.
What did that experience teach you about the real-world energy challenges manufacturers face?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting opportunity. I was actually working for an American corporate at the time. I mentioned a few minutes ago that energy decentralizing was just starting to emerge. This particular manufacturer, which is based in Florida, had actually identified that as a sort of mega trend. And being a contract manufacturer, they were really interested in trying to be a manufacturer of choice for the energy technologies that were going to be formed part of that decentralization revolution. And so I got actually approached to join them in a corporate development role, identifying emerging energy technologies that they could effectively bring under their wing into manufacturing. So it was a fascinating time. We did lots of deals. I did lots of traveling, met lots of really innovative, entrepreneurs and people with great ideas and so on. And we ended up doing, I don't know, about 25 different deals in 3 years with all sorts of different types of energy technologies, brought them in under our wing into Jabil in Florida. And so it was, I guess it was sort of starting to be in that era where sustainability was becoming a priority for some of our customers then. Some of the largest American corporates, I remember back in 15, 16, the first glimmers of, you need your electricity to be green. You need to start becoming more energy efficient. Started percolating through the organization, and our business directors who were in charge of looking after that business had to start taking notice because customers were starting to step up in 2015-16. And so it was pretty opportune that we have been investing in all this distributed energy technology at that stage. The question came, why don't we try and apply some of this cool technology in our own factories? And I think I must have been asked to step backwards. I ended up volunteering to say, I'll do that. I ended up having a great time, forming a team, delivering sort of energy efficiency projects across our factories. As you mentioned, Mexico, Malaysia, China, across the US and in Europe. So it was a great time. Lots of different experiences, different cultures. You've got to implement projects within. Understanding what drives a project team and a project manager in Mexico versus China is a real key to that. And actually having local representation to liaise with those guys and make sure you're getting the full a full understanding of everything is key. But I think one of the things we also learned across the globe is that our facilities guys were all very well-minded. They were all very busy, but they also had different skill sets. Not all of them had the skill set you needed to identify savings and opportunities in the factories. Some of them were very innovative, some weren't, but most lacked the resources to actually do anything locally. And so, the ability to bring resources to the table to actually help implement the project is probably one of the key success factors in making projects happen.
Right. How fascinating, though. That must have been very interesting times, though, getting to travel around the world as this emerging technology was,
Yeah,
coming to be in all the different, energy sectors, like you mentioned,
yeah,
and getting to travel around. And as you mentioned, not only learn about the emerging technology and innovation, but also the culture and seeing how people work and problem solve in different parts of the world.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, absolutely. And you start to realize in different parts of the world, some people don't want to admit that they've got a problem with their internal, say, infrastructure and so on. So it's very one of I think key success factors is not assuming things. Check things for yourself and make sure they're right. The key to success is making sure you've done your homework before you start trying to implement. What you're going to implement on is stable
Yeah.
and it works. So yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a good point. A lot of cultures, right? And just being able to admit certain things, or
yeah.
the way they go about things culturally, and the key to success is identifying that and then
Yeah, good,
working
good,
with it.
good, solid project management. I mean, those core skills go a long way anywhere. So
Yeah. So you've said one of the biggest issues was that great energy projects often got shelved because of payback criteria.
yeah,
When did you realize the real innovation wasn't just technology, but the funding model?
yeah. I mean, I come across it all the time now. Still, only last week I had a company saying they've got an internal payback criteria of 2 years, and it's pretty difficult to actually, apart from really low hanging fruit type easy quick wins, it's pretty difficult with any infrastructure to get a payback of 2 years. It really doesn't exist. And I think what I was fortunate in Jabil, I was operating at VP level, so I got access into treasury guys, legal guys, all the people who were making the sort of really key decisions around the reporting. We were a New York Stock Exchange listed company, so it was great to get to talk to the people who were really involved in the inner workings. And fundamentally, what's behind a 2-year payback is actually somebody in Treasury probably looking after the investment rating of the corporate and trying to manage the balance sheet within certain parameters. And
Mm.
so almost it didn't matter how good the project was, if how cash rich the business was. Often it came down to the bond rating or the investment rating of the business, and commitments the business had made to investors about capital expenditure, for instance, in the year. There might be a cap agreed with investors that they don't think you're going wild investing in capex and so on. And so it sort of really, really occurred to me that 2-year payback is a simplification often for people who don't need to know the full reason why a business isn't spending all those hundreds of millions, billions sitting in the bank.
Yeah.
It's about credit rating, and it's about bond rating and the rates they borrow money at. And that was what we had in our California facility, actually, on-site generation from one of the fuel cell companies who'd put it in without capex for us on a 10-year power purchase agreement. And I think at that point I became aware of it, and then maybe it's the accountancy background in me, but suddenly the penny dropped that actually if we could bring in external capital, do it off balance sheet, which was a really critical thing. And that was, at the time, we had very conservative financial accounting guys in our accounting team. Enron was 5 years old or something like this, and so the people were very, very nervous about the accounting aspect of these things.
Right.
But if we could bring third-party capital in genuinely and deliver an off-balance sheet solution, it was a way to allow longer payback projects to proceed. And fundamentally, that's what we do today. We often see a fantastic project that delivers really significant energy savings, significant carbon savings, but it may have a 3.5, 4.5, 5-year payback. and that would ordinarily sit on the shelf and not happen. We enable those things to happen by us funding them and delivering the benefits as a fixed amount of price per kilowatt that we deliver, which is actually, I should stress, at a rate that's lower than the corporates already pay. So they get savings straight to their P&L,
Yeah.
and they don't have the financial hit of going through CapEx and all the reporting aspects that relate to that. So off-balance sheet third-party financing unlocks a lot of sustainability projects.
Right. And so does your ability to create these different funding models set you apart? Does it differentiate you in the industry?
I think they're very common in, say, single technology solutions. So you often heard about, free solar on your roof and solar PPAs. And I think a lot of institutional investors are comfortable with known technologies and a single technology. I think what sets us apart is that we do multi-technology solutions, where we include energy efficiency solutions, heating solutions, infrastructure upgrade solutions, around things like electrical infrastructure under the same funding structure. And so, it allows a lot of things to be done that aren't just a single technology. I think from that perspective, we're fairly unique. Our funding source, we're a lot more flexible than many, because many go back to effectively institutional funding for them.
Yeah.
They're often bound by institutional financing terms, and those institutions are looking for 20, 25-year agreements with quite stringent terms on them. My experience is most corporates don't really want to commit more than 10 years. Maybe they'll stretch to 15. So there's a bit of an impasse already between institutions and manufacturers. We try to be on the side of the manufacturers and give them structure they can accept and make real difference in the way they operate by having much more efficient infrastructure they operate on.
Yeah. Now, David, when you left Jabil and founded Onsite Energy, what was the original vision, and how was that vision, or how has it evolved as the company has grown?
The original vision was, I'd seen the opportunity in Jabil. At the time, I saw an opportunity to potentially cut our energy bill by half. Reasonable size investment, but it wasn't going to happen through a sort of third party, that scale through a third party finance option at the time. I think we'd spoken to a number of other companies and identified the same challenges. I think fundamentally where it's changed though is we've maybe got a little wider. I think we understand the scope of what's driving companies more today. At the time, there were no such things as science-based target initiatives, and many corporates hadn't committed to decarbonization goals when I left 2018, 2019. It was, and we've seen the uptake of commitments to decarbonization goals since sort of 2022 to 25. So many corporates now are starting to enter the first real milestones in those commitments. There's a 2025 commitment, there's a 2030 commitment coming up.
Yeah.
And many of them, I think, had maybe not appreciated how difficult some of those commitments are to meet, and they don't have solutions for those commitments. So we're sort of, I suppose, adapting our model to helping recognize more the sustainability journey people are on, and the fact that we can help them more on that sustainability journey. And I think one of the other factors that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years is we obviously had the invasion by the Russians, and what happened to energy prices as a result of that. Particularly in Europe, we've got high and sticky high energy prices, much higher than you see in the US. So, and that's caused a lot of pain. So there's a lot of businesses who are in tight margin sectors. A lot of the manufacturing sectors like food manufacturing and chemical manufacturing, particularly sort of commodity chemicals and so on, are really squeezed and are really feeling the pain of energy in Europe. And so, again, one of the key messages we've really adapted our model to is that what we're doing is actually helping businesses become more competitive, actually preserve jobs in the locations they're in. Rather than jobs going off to another country where the energy and operating costs are cheaper. So it's really resonating with local manufacturing sites that actually we can make a real difference to preserving that factory on the site. So it's not just sustainability in terms of carbon emissions and so on. It's actually sustainability in having an operation there and preserving the hundreds and maybe thousands of jobs that rely on that particular site. Yeah, that I think is one of the main evolutions.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, you launched the business in 2021
Yeah,
and won Ford as an early customer, which is
yeah.
a remarkable, accomplishment for a young company. What do you think helped you break through with such a major industrial name?
Probably I'm a little bit of a smooth talker on occasions. I did the sales pitch on that particular one. No, we asked them afterwards. I mean, and it was, to me, it's still unprecedented. I mean, I got an explanation from Ford, and to this day, I still wonder, how on earth it happened. At the time, I was a one person business. We were undercapitalized. We had no other track record and no other projects I could show other than what I pointed to I'd done back in Jabil,
Hmm.
and yet they took the chance on us. And actually, this was a Ford site. It was quite an unusual project in that it was an established manufacturing site, but they were being disconnected from their utilities within a fixed time scale. They took their utilities from another adjacent factory, and that factory needed the power back and the gas back and everything like this. So this Ford site was, if it didn't hit the project within the time scale, it was going to have no energy, which is a pretty crucial operating issue. So we what they told us afterwards, we were the only company who'd come up with the sort of innovative solution that we had, and we're the only company that actually met all their question criteria. We'd worked hard on the approach we were taking, particularly to the use of heat and its reapplication in the facility. So really, we were the only one who was prepared to do all of the finance and actually had a technical solution that met all their requirements and exceeded them. And I think we still try to do that today. It's very much about being innovative and going the extra mile, and trying to think what else we can do to improve the solution, basically. So that's where we are. And Ford's been a great customer and partner now for 5 years nearly, and we've done 4 projects with Ford since then, and we're hoping to go on and do a lot more with them.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking as you're talking, the fact that you were new and small, had a lot of agility, had the
Yeah,
ability to create a custom solution for
yeah,
them, and it sounds like you really listened to their specific needs as well.
yeah.
So, I think that probably had a lot to do with the fact that you were able to adapt to what they were actually asking for in great detail.
And I think we try to do that even today. We're nearly 50 people now. We do the same thing. It's about listening to the customer, understanding their priorities, and then interpreting the data from their sites to make sure we hit their goals, basically. And the exciting thing about the energy space is so fast moving from a technology perspective. So
Yeah.
there's new ideas and opportunities coming forward all the time.
Right. Yeah. So smooth talking, yes, but I think that that it was actually value that you're
You're not meant to
delivering.
agree with that one, but it's
Now, on-site energy has grown to more than 90 million in assets under
yeah.
management in just 4 years. What were the most important early decisions that set the foundation for that kind of growth?
The main decision has been we've got an amazing investor family who are behind us. I think they recognised at the outset that a lot of businesses in our space maybe focus on, say, winning the project with Ford, but then they go out and fundraise, and actually, Ford actually has a deadline. Corporates, as soon as they make that decision to go, really they want it delivered yesterday, and so the ability to go out or the ability to spend money as soon as they make that decision, or even knowing they're going to make that decision and committing money to get ahead of the program and deliver on the program is really key. So, I mean, actually, we took the decision. One of the inhibitors that we'd sort of seen before was just the speed that the banks move at. The banks have their own time frames. They actually process things through. And we couldn't wait for the banks. So actually, one of the big decisions was the family capitalized us to be able to build the whole project completely with equity, not wait for
Ah,
the banks. And that was probably the foundational thing for me, because we really never looked back from that decision. I delivered 3 projects in that first year, all with equity. And, the bank funding came in 6 months later. So we'd have missed the deadlines with Ford,
right.
the thing wouldn't have happened. And so actually being properly capitalized at the outset and having a mature attitude to find where the finance is going to come was probably the most crucial thing.
You're asking large industrial businesses to trust a relatively young company with critical energy infrastructure. How do you overcome the credibility hurdle when buyers naturally lean toward established giants?
If ever you've read Michael Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, it's often used in the software sector. It's, I think, a classic from Silicon Valley, the Crossing the Chasm thing. It was something that was drilled home to me when I was at Jabil. Every product goes through an innovation cycle or an adoption cycle. And, the first people who adopted the things are the absolute people with, absolute tech nerds and innovators who were willing to try a product even though it's, untested, unproven. And that's where we are. Energy services and energy as a service is a product that's been going through an innovation cycle. We started off, and really what we had to do was identify those companies at that stage that were prepared to take a risk on us, and and had a need that they needed to fulfill and couldn't find another way to fulfill it. So that was the sort of limited market that we had available to us at that time. What we've done since then to breach that credibility gap is done a lot of things around thought leadership and getting articles out there about how companies can address their energy requirements. We've broken a lot of stories on new approaches and new technologies. And of course, now we've got a lot of reference sites. And so there's nothing better than actually bringing prospective customers to a site you built and them realizing they could have one. And it's quite different in their mindset to what they'd expected. And actually to speak to the facility manager of the place we've implemented it, and for him to tell them that his experience of working with us and how well the system is working and so on is just absolutely invaluable. I think of the first open day we had at Ford, actually, I think we sent out something like 70 invitations. We got 50 acceptances. And I think we got about 6 new customers straight away from that. So, I think that's it. You've got to prove you're actually you're walking the talk, not just talking it, and it's not just vaporware. So it's about real valid opinions, and the more you build credibility of those sort of things, the easier it is to sell, to be honest. So our job's becoming easier and easier as it goes forward, and obviously it's being enabled by the business model we have as well.
Okay. Now you said a couple of interesting things. For one, you said you establish yourself or your company as a thought leader. So are you yourself the one who is out there publishing and moving that conversation forward, or do you have experts within your engineers who are creating that conversation around innovation and in the energy space?
It started off as me, and obviously I'd had the background in Jabil and investigating all these emerging energy technologies, so I had quite a good background to call upon. What's been really nice is we've actually we've taken on a lot of engineers in our team now, even some younger graduates from universities and so on, and it's been fantastic for them to start writing these articles. The team discusses the things we want to put out as themes now. So it's not just driven by me. We see opportunities in the market. We get briefings on regulatory changes coming our way and things like this. So we've got a lot more to talk about now. But no, it's about staying topical, and understanding the needs of our customers and giving them advice, related to that. So. Yeah,
no, it's a great marketing strategy, and I mean publishing those on whether it's your website, blog, press release, or distributing it throughout newsletter, etc. But that's a great strategy to establish yourself.
Starting to appreciate the value of podcasts as well.
Yeah, podcasts. It's all about content these days. It's how people find you, and it's that credibility score, right?
It is. Absolutely.
Exactly. Now, you've described your company as more agile and entrepreneurial than larger competitors. In practice, how does that agility translate into better outcomes for customers?
Yeah, we try to pride ourselves on speed of response. So ideally, and we hear this because we've recruited a lot of people from larger companies. We can typically turn around data and go back to a customer with a proposition within 2 weeks. We often the stories or anecdotes I'm getting is that could be 2-3 months before anybody comes back. And equally, we make decisions very fast. So we've got a very short lines of decision making. So we can make a decision to back a company, back a concept we're putting out within a week in terms of the sign off from our board and so on. So we're out there trying to I think we're trying to develop more innovative solutions still. We try to live by sort of speed of response, quality of response, and innovation as our sort of core principles. In fact, there's a fourth we've added on, which is actually I'm trying to remember it now. It's about improvement as well. So trying to improve the project we've done during the life of the projects as well. So we're trying to better them. So we try to live by those principles. We actually have KPIs to track ourselves against those principles, and we try to make sure that whatever we're doing in the organization as we grow, we try to stay true to those principles. Yeah, it's about speed engagement and quality engagement, so that people understand it.
Speed, quality, and like you said, those KPIs, being able to track your outcomes. So it's not just, it's talk, it's actual tangible results, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned that you have open houses or tours that you do like at a site after. And so there's not a security issue, or companies are open to that?
Yeah, we've generally got a secure, we've got a compound or something that our host company has allowed us to have. We generally lease that area. Uh-huh. So of course, the sensitivity about going within the factory, and they don't want, there's obviously sensitive manufacturing processes can be going on. But generally, we're located outside of the main building. We have a compound round the back, and our energy center is usually within but it's usually within a secure perimeter that the factory's in, so that we don't have problems with strangers wandering into our facilities or anything. As we lock our facilities anyway. But it's usually by prior agreement. We're just for instance doing an event in a week or so at a customer site. We're hosting actually the whole of the Society of Motor Manufacturers in the UK coming to a motor site, a manufacturing site. And of course, there's commercial sensitivities there, but we've agreed the program and where they can be taken and what they can be seen, shown, and so on in terms of the equipment we've implemented. But we find most of our hosts are quite proud of showing off what we've done, actually. So.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it benefits them to show off their capabilities as well. I think it's a brilliant marketing strategy as well to invite people to an event and show them what you've created and the capabilities.
I think often company directors or sustainability don't have a clear mental picture of what it is you're proposing to them. Mm-hmm. You can show it in pictures to them and so on, but until they actually visit a facility, it doesn't become real to them. Yeah. And then suddenly it all clicks into place that actually this isn't this huge commitment, or it isn't this huge area of land that they need to commit to this. It actually can be quite small and it works pretty well.
Yeah, like show and tell, it really connects the concepts to the results. And
exactly, no, very, very much so.
Yeah. So for listeners who may not know how the model works, how does a zero-CapEx off-balance sheet energy solution actually work? Like you were mentioning, that strategy before. And why is that so compelling for energy-intensive manufacturers?
So typically the output that we present to a customer with the concept is an analysis showing them how much electricity they currently consume, how much gas they currently consume, or other fuels they currently consume, the cost of that, and their current utility costs as column one. Column two is basically a column that says this is how it changes if you go down the route of you funding the CapEx yourselves. And so, they can see the implications of that. They can see the savings in terms of the energy costs, and they can see the CapEx value, and they can see a payback. It's a very straightforward comparison. And then typically we have two other columns to the side, and these are the two columns where we fund the solution. And it might be that we give them an illustration over 10 years or 15 years or whatever the right durations are. But they can see side by side the options of stay as you are, fund it yourself, or us fund it, and so on. And the most notable things are we pay for all the maintenance on the site if we do a zero CapEx solution. So we maintain our assets, we take performance risk in our assets. We take responsibility for that. So the only way we get paid is through delivering kilowatts to the customer. And also the key point is that that kilowatt value is known to them. We actually set the price of how we're going to charge at the outset. You might ask, where do we make money in this? Because obviously the rate per kilowatt is less than the rate they're paying from the grid, and yet we're paying all this money out to spend, to fund the capital. And
Right.
it's really down to the operating efficiencies we're finding, to generate, say, power on site. That efficiency is captured on site, so if you're putting in a gas engine, say, it's 88% efficient or thereabouts, you deliver that power into the facility using gas as a fuel source. And you still have all the heat to use on the facility, which you don't with grid generation. That heat gets wasted at the power station. So there's opportunities to do that. And often when you are generating on site, what they call behind the meter.
Mm-hmm.
So if your viewers look at their energy bills, they'll see two sets of charges, basically, or three main categories of charges. They'll see a fixed charge, so a standing charge for their connection, if you like, their capacity.
Mm-hmm.
They'll see a charge that's rated per kilowatt for the energy they're actually consuming. And they'll see a lot of other charges that are also charged per kilowatt, which tend to be things like government subsidy recharges, third-party charges for use of grid transmission and things like this. And certainly one of the challenges we have in Europe, whether it's the same in the US, I don't know, but that energy bill can be 60% made of third-party charges and grid transmission charges. So if you're doing it behind the meter, you avoid it all. So you've immediately got a 60% discount on your bill and plus efficiency. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we do is we use some of that money, the efficiency savings, to effectively pay for our CapEx and our return on capital. So it's a great solution. Behind the meter really works for many manufacturers. It gives them control over their destiny. It makes them more energy autonomous. It solves a lot of problems for people, but corporates don't do it. They think the only way to energy is to buy energy through a broker and through the grid. No is the answer. It's much more efficient to take control of your own destiny and generate as much of your own energy as you can on site. It's a way to reliable operating costs, and so on. So
Right.
there's a lot of other advantages to doing it through a PPA like this. It avoids capital replacement cycles when you've got the equipment is wearing out. Steam boilers become gradually less and less efficient, and the older they get.
Right.
You see a lot of companies, say, working with a 30, 40-year-old steam boiler is probably only 60% efficient. So that 40% of this inefficiency is going up as wasted heat that they're
Mm-hmm.
getting no value for, and yet they're paying for all that gas. Just replacing it, suddenly get a 30% efficiency gain. There's a lot of things like that people don't spot, and yet it can be funded through a zero-CapEx PPA in the same way. We can charge for kilowatts of electricity, or we can charge for kilograms of steam or pounds of steam in the US, I guess. That's how it works.
Yeah. So do you think there's a lack of awareness for this type of model in
Yeah, I
general?
think so. I think it's becoming more and more understood now.
Okay.
I think there was a reticence of doing these things. I think again there was a very common understanding or view that a PPA is just 25-year solar PPA and doesn't really apply to us because it's solar. Solar has very little impact, and 25 years is too long. Now I think people can appreciate you can do pretty much any energy technology, any energy efficiency technology investment, any electrification investment through a PPA. And the shortest PPAs so far we've actually done for Ford, and we did an 8-year PPA. So Ford, I explain why 8 years. It's actually a better deal for most manufacturers. They don't take as much savings because we've got to recoup the capital investment over a shorter period at the front end.
Yeah.
But at the end of 8 years, they step into full ownership. And so it's like they've stepped into the CapEx benefits of the assets from year 9 onwards. And so it's a huge boost to their energy costs at that point. So their OpEx costs drop off a cliff. And
Right.
so they've seen that as a real benefit. So yeah, short term is actually better than long term, even though you don't take as many short term savings. It depends on the corporate whether they want to maximize savings in the short term and take a longer perspective to earn that. But yeah, that's a decision they have to take.
Yeah. David, you work across sectors, including automotive, food manufacturing, chemicals, pharma, semiconductors, and building materials. What makes a company the right fit for on-site energy's model?
Energy intensive, usually, they're high energy consumers on the site, generally both electricity and gas. That might mean they particularly obviously energy intensive processes, or there's a particular climate they have to achieve within the building. So air conditioning and humidity management and so on is a critical part of what they do. And it's often one of the things you walk into a building and you don't appreciate you feel comfortable in a building, but the infrastructure that goes into making you feel comfortable or making the machines operate in the right climate is usually one of the biggest energy loads. But I mean, no, a great right fit customer for us is generally a multinational, multi-site operation, actually with lots of different. Each site can be different. Each site usually is different. They're all laid out physically different. They do slightly different things. They have different utility costs, different profiles, different climates, and so on. So we love that challenge. There's no one size fits all, but a multinational, multi-site customer is the ideal for us, and somebody who's spending a lot of money on energy.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, you're not just helping with solar or generation, you're also
No.
supporting electrification, efficiency, and broader decarbonization strategy. How do you decide which mix of solutions will create the biggest impact for a given customer?
Data. I think one of the things that sets us apart when people understand is we're not a product business. We're not tasked with selling X amount of solar panels each month and, trying to maximize the amount of solar we put on a roof or whatever. We look at what is the best answer for the customer. And that's usually, it's delving into not only the quantity of electricity or gas they consume, but understanding why it's being consumed and what is going on. So once we understand, particularly on say heat, that is going on, producing steam at a particular pressure, or is going into ovens, or is going into annealing process or tempering processes, whatever, we can start to understand the potential solutions we can have to mitigate that fossil fuel load and alternative ways to generate the power. If we almost look at each factory as a black box, and the black box tends to be supplied with grid electricity, a steam boiler house, or some of those facilities, we try to look at ways we can actually generate those inputs much more cost effectively or with lower carbon. Our challenge becomes that we try to look at the physical layout and the data to understand, what we can do with the impact. So, often in a large manufacturing site, you might cover it with solar, and it would meet 4, 5, 6% of the energy demand on the site. It really doesn't move the needle.
Right.
We're generally looking for something that really moves the needle and makes it an interesting project for the company as well.
Yeah, but you have a lot of tools at your disposal. And so, like you mentioned, so you're customizing each project according to the needs of the customer. Now, you've also mentioned helping major customers work into their supply chains, especially around Scope 3 emissions. How big of an opportunity is that? And how does it change the role you or your company can play?
Maybe some of your viewers might not be totally familiar with Scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 is generally sort of fossil fuel, gas-based type emissions where you're burning, fuel oils and gas and so on in your factory, physically on site. Scope 2 is sort of brought in basically grid electricity and so on, the quantities and the carbon intensity of that is being supplied. Scope 3 is basically the emissions from your, shall we say, non-site activities. So typically it's transportation, but it's also supply chain. So many corporates define, I think it's one of the scopes and is maybe less defined than others about how far you go. And depending on the corporate policy, some of them take a lot of responsibility for the carbon footprint of their entire supply chain.
Wow.
Some of them limit it to port movements or whatever. But certainly a lot of our automotive clients take the supply chain emissions quite seriously. But it's also many people's sort of decarbonization so far has been focused on Scope 2 and Scope 1, either buying offsets, which is not a great long-term strategy, or actually doing energy efficiency projects on Scope 1 and 2. Generally, Scope 3, they're at a much earlier stage in terms of their decisions on what to do. And, the challenge you've got there is you've actually got to measure it first of all. So actually you've got to get the collaboration of your supply chain to report in a particular way. You've then got to start tracking it. And also, you're not in a position to make the supply chain make changes quite often. It's down to that company in the supply chain to make the investment decision to do something or to
Right.
identify something. So certainly some of our larger customers now who have very mature, sophisticated supply chain programs, so things like in the automotive sector, they have supplier days now where they bring suppliers in and maybe run them through all their sustainability goals and explain the support they'll give them towards achieving sustainability goals. And some of those are now starting to refer us in because, we're effectively a free method of putting innovation into the supply chain and us funding the measures for the supply chain to adopt as well. So I think that's how we're starting to be recognized and used as a really valuable partner for decarbonizing supply chain as well, and doing the same job we do with the principal customer, but
Hmm.
actually just a level down.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. That was all new to me, learning about the different scopes. And yeah, it's like, okay, how do you become responsible for, reducing the emissions of your supply chain? But that makes sense. You bring them in and you educate them and you
Yeah.
offer them resources and
Yeah.
services like yours. Yeah.
And an example also, I mean, we worked with a bakery client recently, and we spotted some temporary refrigeration units on site. So they were actually freezing goods. They're coming out of the factory, putting them onto pallets, freezing them, and then there's a constant stream of lorries coming in and out. And it turned out, they had a tiny capacity on site for storage.
Hmm.
And yet they had something like 11,000 pallets in cold storage about, 15, 20 miles away. An example of scope 3 emissions is all those lorry movements that they're going backwards and forwards, and all that third party cold store energy emissions cost is part of their scope 3. So as an example, we actually came up with an alternative strategy, which was to build them a bigger cold store themselves on site. And so, which actually gave them much more production flexibility and ability to hold, key ingredients, which they otherwise couldn't. So we actually could save them 97% of their scope 3 emissions and save them a couple of £1 million in cold storage costs.
Hmm.
So that's an example when you start thinking a bit more laterally
Yeah.
about the sort of the things that can be done to improve business, but also reduce scope 3 emissions.
Yeah. No, that's very significant. Now, Onsite is expanding into Ireland, Germany, and wider
Yeah.
Europe. What are you seeing in those markets, and what has to happen operationally and strategically to scale successfully beyond the UK?
Yeah. I mean, we see similar patterns in those markets. They're all generally high energy cost markets. We look at the regulatory support for the sort of things that we're doing. Are we allowed to do PPAs legally? Is there support for energy efficiency or renewables and so on in those markets? And all of them support that. I mean, Europe is a good platform for that. They're very progressive from that perspective. But I mean, the key to operating strategically is to have good people experience and know the local markets. We've been fortunate enough to do that. We've got a very experienced, a very well-connected head of Ireland. Similarly, we're starting off in June in Germany as well. We've got some experienced guys we've taken on there. We're looking at recruiting experienced operational people to support them. And we look for, I guess, one thing that's different from the US is we obviously have different languages to cope with in Europe as well. So we're
Right.
looking for the language skills, but it's an understanding of, as I alluded to back, on the Jobel days, it's about understanding culture in those countries that's a little different as well.
Hmm.
So we always try to learn lessons. We try to partner in those countries as well. So it's really about trying to find strong local partners we can work with, maybe with people with established operations that we're already aligned with, maybe in our domestic market that we're trying to move in with. And we've got customers in the UK who have operating facilities in Germany and in Ireland and so on as well. So we try to go through our existing customers and to win projects in their facilities in those countries. The same crossing the chasm analogy emerges in those countries. We're right back at the beginning of the curve in Germany. We have no operating sites. Nobody's heard of us. We've got no thought leadership in Germany. So, we have to go through the same cycle again of building credibility in Germany, showing them operating facilities. Of course, in
Yeah.
principle, you can bring them over to the UK and show them the sites, but I think generally most people don't believe it until they see it in their own backyard, in their own industry, in their own backyard. So we've got to go right through that cycle. We've got to be patient. We've got to build again. And I'm sure that, I don't think the cycles will be as long as the first time round, but that's exactly what we've got to do. We've got to recognize we're the newbie on the block and nobody's heard of us, and we've got to build trust again.
Yeah, but you have your playbook and you have the experience and the awareness. And
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
we have customers who are recognized now as well. So it's much easier.
very true. Yeah. So you're also watching and adopting emerging technologies, including high temperature heat pumps and other
Yeah.
innovations. How do you balance being innovative with managing performance risk for customers?
It's something we did at the outset. I'm quite passionate about trying to break new technology and give new technology a lift. And effectively, this is where many corporates, if they see a high temperature heat pump, they'd want to see it operating in the field for years before they take the risk of investing in it themselves. I guess we're fairly experienced people at systems integrating and spotting technology risk and so on and things. We also know how to do technical DD on a lot of these technologies as well, whether see whether they've been through some sort of accelerated aging sort of testing and that type of thing there as well. But one of the things we've done for years now is we actually engage external technical diligence, so external consultancy, the likes of people like DNV and so on, to go in. We pay for them to go in, do a deep dive on the technology and the company as well, and write a report for us. And so we also use DNV to extensively report on our projects. And so it gives our funders a degree of confidence that we've got a third-party corroboration as well as our own view on the technology. And actually, DNV, we can also effectively, our lenders can take reliance on DNV's report. So there's an element of a bit of a professional indemnity cover on the line from DNV as well. We're always looking for innovations and technology breakthroughs and so on, but whereas equally realistic, we've got to get warranties that are worth something, and when you don't have that, you've got to get some additional comfort from, I say, the likes of working with a DNV.
Right. Yeah. Mitigating that risk. I think that's
Yeah,
essential as well.
our
Yeah.
business is all about mitigating risk. Whether that's financial risk or commodity risk or what have you, or performance risk. That's the business.
Yeah. So, David, finally, you hinted that your team is working on a potentially new form of renewable energy. Without
Mm.
giving away anything confidential, what excites you most about where energy solutions are headed over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of boundaries being pushed now. Energy technology is probably changing faster than it's ever done in the 15 years or so I've been tracking the sector now. Seeing tremendous things, but I'm starting to see more thinking of integration, sort of end-to-end solutions. So, a great example of that is something like carbon capture. People talk about carbon capture as an end solution,
Yeah.
but the reality is, what do you do with the carbon once you've captured it? And I think I'm seeing lots of now technical breakthroughs in that as well. It's not about just storing it indefinitely, and which I think is a really bad idea, by the way. But it's
Yeah.
so I'm sort of seeing more integrated solutions, end-to-end solutions, and I think that's one of the things that we're in a fortunate position to do, because there's not many people integrate and look at it from one end to the other. It's trying to find a completely new way to view something. We've got something like that at the moment. We see the opportunity to completely hit net zero in a large manufacturing site now, with a solution that had been largely discounted, actually, which bizarrely. It's because it's like looking at a headline in a newspaper. A lot of people look at the headline and think they understand the article, but they don't
Right.
read the article. And I think what's happening in energy is, we're reading the article, but we're also reading the book. It goes in. There's a bigger picture and systems coming together. So things like microgrids are going to become more common. There's going to be multiple solutions to address businesses. You might find them actually taking something out they put in because they realize it's actually constraining them to do a better solution overall. And I think that's what's going to happen in the next probably 5 to 10 years, but certainly the innovation is going to continue to happen in the next 3 to 5.
Yeah. Well, exciting times. I guess
Yeah.
we'll see how things evolve.
Brilliant. Thank you for your questions, Leanne.
Yeah, David, thank you for joining me and sharing your insights. Great conversation. How can listeners learn more about on-site energy?
come and have a look at the website. We're at www.on-site, that is, .energy. And hopefully you see a lot of our case studies and the things we get up to on there. If anybody wants a conversation, then please get in touch. We're pretty easy people to talk to.
All right. Well, thank you, David. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to Industry Ignited. Be sure to subscribe and join us for the next episode. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting industry.